Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
I'm happy to have with me one of my favorites, Chris Kimball. And I've been a fan of Chris's for a long time. I've followed him through all the different things that he does. He's a chef, he's an editor, he's a publisher, he does television, radio. He does almost everything. In fact, he was the founder of American Test Kitchen, Cook's Country, the creator of Milk Street. And I know a lot of you because you've asked me about Milk Street in the past. Wonderful recipes. And yet, even though many of them are from all kinds of places all over the world, we can cook from them. They're easy. They're not that complicated. And he does Milk Street TV. He's got a public radio show. I buy even gadgets. They have all kinds of things in a retail store. So I don't remember. I think, Chris, you once told me you grew up on a farm, or am I making that up?
No, I spent summers and weekends on a small farm in Vermont, a town of about 300 people, and the farmhouse didn't have running water. I mean, had running water and a pump, but had an outhouse and a wood stove, and yeah, it was very much a 19th century existence in the summers. But at least I learned how to bake there,
and probably delicious stuff too.
Anadama bread, molasses cookies, cider, nutmeg donuts, baking powder biscuits. Yeah, it's good food.
Well, I know, and I think I told you, I spent many, many years in Vermont in an old brick farmhouse outside of Newfane.
Right, I remember.
I learned how to put food out. I was so proud of myself, doing all that stuff, because the nearest supermarket was 45 minutes away. I was out of Newfane, the town behind it. And it was a deal to go to the market, especially in the winter when we still had a lot of snow in those days. It's changed.
Well, my neighbors down the road, still today, I think 85% of their food they catch, shoot, or grow. And they... Yeah, their supermarket's half an hour away at least. So some things haven't changed.
No, that's right. And the thing that changed radically for us was the pet lamb. The neighbors planned you could keep the lamb for the summer, and then that guy's lamb chops for the winter. And that was it for the kids. That was the last time meat was consumed, and they were little.
No, my kids, we grew up raising pigs and beef. And
pigs are so cute, little.
Yeah, well, when we had to slaughter them in September, they actually, I told them to go in the house. They came out and watched. And,
no.
I think it's good for kids to understand where their food comes from. And they all still eat meat today, but some of them went through a vegetarian phase, but that's for sure.
Yeah, I think everyone's kids do that at some point or another. And one of mine is still, forget it. She has a big picture of her favorite lamb on the wall. She's not eating that stuff, but my other one does. And I love your new book. Chris Kimball has come out with Milk Street, Cook What You Have, Make a Meal Out of Almost Anything. And he means it, He made me open my cupboard. He didn't know he did that. But I found a lot of things that he talked about. I found grains and beans. I found cans of Italian tomatoes. And then I went to my freezer, and I had a lot of chicken. And his recipes for Hungarian paprikas, or a chicken kind of stew, everything. And it was a sort of a new way to cook with a lot of familiar ingredients. So what made you do this, making a meal out of almost anything? Your listeners wanted this?
Well, actually, a friend of mine, Alex, I knew, lives in Paris. He's on our radio show occasionally, and I asked him. I said, "Well, what are some of the recipes you would make on a Tuesday night in Paris? What are the typical Parisian meals?" And he said, "We just cook what we have." He said, "We don't really have recipes. We just go to the market or look in our cupboards or whatever, and then he cooks whatever's around." And I thought that was such an interesting answer, a smart answer. So we decided to open our own cabinets and look inside. But, I mean, if you think about it, almost all cuisines at their origins were very frugal, right? Because nobody had any money. So in Italy, if you had bread, you can do a bread and tomatoes, or you can do a bread, a tomato soup with bread as the basis, or you could turn stale bread into croutons and put that on top of something, or you could do bread pudding. So in Spain, they make a wonderful soup with garlic and bread. So these simple things, a can of beans, lemons. In Amalfi, they make a lemon pesto with almonds and lemons, and it takes about 30 seconds in a food processor, and you're done. So some of that best food is really, simple, and you don't have to go out and spend $50 on ingredients. It's all, pretty much right there.
Right, thanks to you and knowing how to use it. And as you said, I still remember going with my grandmother to the butcher with live chickens. That was a little complicated for a kid, but then she never wasted one part. Feet, everything went into soups and stews, and was an interesting way to live. Cooks of that generation used almost everything, and now you're bringing us back.
Well, my mother, who grew up in Virginia, said that when she was a kid, they use every part of the pig but the squeal. That's what they did. And then another friend of mine who's a chef says, give me a 4 or 5 pound chicken, I can serve 12 people because I can make 6 different things out of it, right? So yeah, I mean, someone like Jacques Pepin, for example, he's not going to throw anything away. And that's why, in a French restaurant, they would have a back burner and everything, or in the day of Fanny Farmer, everything you used went back into that stock pot, right? The water you used to cook cabbage, all the trimmings, whatever, would be used to make stock. So, we don't have to go to that extent now. But, boy, there's so much, like a can of chickpeas. Chickpeas, there's a million recipes using chickpeas all over the Middle East. You can put them with yogurt. You can simmer them in a sort of butter sauce. You can do all sorts of things. You can make hummus out of it, et cetera. So the simplest thing in your cupboard can be used in 20 different ways.
Yeah, and good. I mean, what you do with vegetables that I might have been tempted to throw out, and even eggs, a frittata becomes something special. And I'm a fried rice person, and a wonderful idea and recipes for doing fried rice. Well,
fried rice, a stir fry, a frittata, a strata, which is essentially a quiche with bread in it, and no crust. I mean, these are all sort of 20-in-1 recipes, right? You can make a frittata out of anything, or a strata, or any of those things, or a basic soup. So yeah, I mean that's the thing that's so nice. If you have some ham on hand, you can throw that into the frittata or the strata. If you have some leftover vegetables, whatever, you can make what you want.
No, and one of my kids never met kale that she didn't love. I mean, I reached a point when I couldn't look at anything green for a while, but love your recipe for kale and cheddar melt with caramelized onions. It looks so good.
Well, caramelized onions is one of those things. When I was in Beirut a few years ago, I went to a person's home apartment, and we made mahadra, which is the rice and lentils with caramelized onions. And this was his go-to dish for his kids. He had kids under 10 years old, and they love it, and I love it. So he cooked rice and lentils together, and then he just topped them with slowly cooked onions. and those onions get really sweet and caramelized, and you put them on top of rice and lentils. It's 3 ingredients, right? It's just absolutely delicious.
No, it is delicious. And then I marked the chicken with apples and cider vinegar sauce. Everyone is always saying, what can I do with chicken? Because it seems to be America's top seller.
Well, I was just cooking with Fuchsia Dunlop. She wrote The Food of Sichuan. She lives in London. And she poaches chicken because she thinks it's moister that way.
In water or stock?
Just water. She says in Sichuan, they take a whole chicken, put it in boiling water, turn the water off, the heat off, and let it sit and cook it. Anyway, she serves that. She shreds it, and then she serves it with a very simple sauce, with maybe some black vinegar, some soy sauce, some toasted sesame oil. And so you take a chicken, put it in water, cook it gently, shred it, and then throw a 1-minute sauce on it. And it's absolutely delicious. And that's something we always want to do something fancier with it, but boy, that
works.
That's really good. That really works. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your tandoori.
Another method is, I spoke to Jose Andres, and he said when he grew up, they used to boil their vegetables, which turns out, by the way, not to be any less healthy than steaming. And he said all they did was, put olive oil and salt and pepper on the platter, or a Chinese technique is to heat up about a quarter cup of oil with put some grated ginger on the vegetables, some chopped scallion, and pour that hot oil over that, and it sizzles the ginger and the scallions. Mm. So, you boil vegetables for 15 minutes, drain them, and put this hot oil on top with ginger and scallion, and you have dinner, really.
And most of us wouldn't have thought of that, pouring it over. I would have thought of sautéing it in the pot. But I like pouring it over even better.
Well, you can hear it. I mean, I've done it on video. I mean, it really does sizzle, and it just brings out the flavor. And so, you learn so much when you cook with other people because they tend to have better ideas than I do. So.
Well, I say you're pretty good at it. How is that beef and bean chili you have, that 8-ingredient one?
Yeah, chili doesn't, that's another thing we learn is that it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need 20 ingredients. In fact, the best recipes tend to have fewer than 10 ingredients. They just have to be the right ingredients in the right proportion. But I love that. I just think the other thing the book uses a lot is using bold flavors like from the pantry. If you have a decent pantry, right, you have some big flavors like fermented sauces like soy sauce or oyster sauce or whatever, sesame oil. Maybe you have some pomegranate molasses. You have a few of those items. And then you can really go to town because you can take something simple like chicken but make a sauce in literally 40 seconds that's going to have a ton of flavor that goes nicely with it. So, tahini is a good thing to keep around, for example, et cetera. So that makes cooking so much easier if you just buy a few things for the pantry that you keep on hand.
Right, and you use fish oil a lot. Now, when I was growing up, we never heard of fish oil. It probably was here, but no one ever cooked with it that I knew then.
Well, even 5 years ago, if you said fish sauce, most people would turn their nose up. Yeah, and that is because I think what you buy in the supermarket was pretty bad. But a really good fish sauce, which is, anchovies and salt, et cetera, have been sitting for quite a long time. And you get that first, at the bottom of the barrel, there's a spigot, and you open it, you get that quote-unquote first pressing. I mean, that stuff isn't fishy, right? It doesn't really taste like fish. It's umami.
It's right.
Yeah.
It gives a flavor that...
Yeah, someone I know said they put fish sauce in, I've forgotten what it was, but it was something you'd never think of, just a little bit. And he said no one ever knows what's in there, but they all think it's really delicious. So it's like anchovies, right? If you have one anchovy, you dissolve in some olive oil before you saute your onions. No one knows there's an anchovy in there. They just know that there's a little depth of flavor. And that's what fish sauce is great at. It's just one of those things when used in moderation in a soup or a stew, it'll just add depth, right, which is great.
Right. It's good. And there's so many recipes. The shrimp fra diavolo, I love that. I never thought of doing it with shrimp.
Yeah, shrimp are it's sort of like veal. It's one of those things that takes on any flavor. I love the sort of caramelized shrimp, with the Vietnamese dish where you start with sugar and water and make a caramel syrup. You add fish sauce and some ginger, et cetera, and then the protein, chicken, shrimp, whatever fish, and it cooks in just a few minutes. And you have such great flavor there.
Yeah, well, I have the last of the tomatoes from the garden and the local farm. And, of course, what popped up? Your bread, bacon, and tomato hash.
Yeah, that's good. And the tomato soup with no cream bisque, which, again, uses bread. Well, bread will give you a very creamy texture, which is great. And then there are all sorts of, salads, the classic Italian salad with tomatoes and bread. I mean, tomatoes, even if you don't have great tomatoes, if you do it right, you can make them good.
This can work.
This can work. Yeah,
it really sounds good. And are you still traveling all over the world?
Yes, I just started traveling again. I was in Mexico and Jalisco in February. I was in Turkey and southern Turkey, Antakya in March, and I just got back from London and Paris. And by the way, I have to say, when I was in London, Paris, and when I read the papers here or read the news, it just sounds like Europe's in terrible straits, and all the restaurants were packed. Everybody was on the streets. They seem life's going on as usual over there. So that was really nice to see.
No, it's interesting because you're right. Pick up any paper and you feel the world is falling apart, and like, woe is me, has been the attitude, and we just can't go on like that.
Well, I went past a pub around 6 o'clock in London. We were rushing off to whatever, and there must have been 100 people standing outside in the street having a pint, and they all were relaxing and talking and having a good time, and so happy. And so I'm going like, if you read the news from over here, it sounds like it's the end of the world, but that's what I love especially about Paris, is it just seems like life goes on.
Did you have great meals in Paris and London?
I did. I don't tend to eat. I don't eat at fancy restaurants anymore. I'm done with that. So I eat at small bistros and cafes. The thing I had the two things in Paris that were the best. One was stuffed cabbage, believe it or not, and it was so good.
I believe that.
They have this local sausage, and they minced it, and it was just delightful. It was really good. And then it was a little place where it was a Vietnamese place. It was a takeout and sit down. And he made fried chicken wings, Vietnamese style. So he fried them, and then he had a little wok, a half-size wok, with some lemongrass and some soy sauce, et cetera, and fish sauce, excuse me. And he just tossed the fried chicken in the wok for about 2 minutes. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It was just really good. The other thing I had was at another Vietnamese place. I was doing a story on Southeast Asian food in Paris, and she made donuts, fried donuts, yeasted donuts, and she filled them with kaya, which is pandan leaf sort of extract with coconut milk. It's bright green.
Oh, my gosh.
And that was, oh, my Lord, that was so... She also made a chocolate sesame tahini, version, but that kaya was, oh, boy, that was the best donut I ever had in my life.
Oh, my God. How do you stay thin when you're eating all this stuff?
Well, I guess the first question you'd have to ask is, have I stayed fit? You might want to ask that first.
Well, I've seen you on things, and you look pretty slim.
Well, I'm not as slim as I was pre-COVID, let me put it like that. Well, we
none
do.
Of us are.
I have a videographer I travel with. He's Ewan from Scotland, and he has a big backpack with his stuff, and I have a backpack with my stuff. We walk all over, So we walked all over Paris and London, so I think we probably worked off as many calories as we ate.
Right. And it really is a treat. Do you still go into people's homes or check any of that out?
Sure. I visit. When I visited Fuchsia Dunlop in London, we went to her. She just moved in East London. Yeah, I like going to people's homes and cooking with them because then I really get a sense of how they cook, and it's more intimate than just getting something at a restaurant. That's how I really like to cook. So watching people cook at home and maybe even helping out a little bit is, you get to know them, but you also really get to understand why they do things the way they do. And people's techniques around the world are very different. They see food differently. It's not if you're in Saigon, it's a different, or if you're in Chiang Mai or whatever, they just see food differently and they think about it differently. And that's really a pleasure.
Right. And food always says welcome, no matter who you are or where you are.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. I got into food, as you did probably, because, it's everybody gets to sit at the table, right? So I totally believe that it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you look like. Everybody gets to share food, and it's sort of the last vestige of humanity. This world is not getting better, but food is an opportunity for us to sit down together, right? And I know that sounds corny, but
no, but I believe that.
I really do believe that, and so my feeling is everybody's welcome. Yeah,
right, and it brings back memories. I think I told you once that on some holiday, one of my kids said, "Why aren't you making XYZ?" It was one of my mother's things. I said, "Because you guys don't like it." And my son said, "We don't have to like it, but we have to have her at the table." And that's how we get. And that was from a kid. And I thought, he's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's, I did a TV show called My Family Recipe, and we help people reconstitute family recipes that were lost or whatever. And then we went with them into their home where they cooked them for their family and friends. And I got to tell you, most of the time, it ended up in tears, because
understand.
They remembered their mother or their grandmother or their uncle, and it food memories are deeply personal. And as you just said, that's a great story. It's not a question of just the food. It's a question of who cooked it and what that means to you and in your life. And it's deeply personal. Yeah.
Well, you did a great job. I love the new book, Milk Street, Cook What You Have, Make a Meal Out of Almost Anything, by the one and only Christopher Kimball. Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Yeah, all the best. Great to talk to you.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.